Hi, I'm James from Chaosium. I sat down with David Larkins, who is the line editor for Pendragon, and when we chatted, it was the release day of the new starter set. This is basically a Q&A video. I asked David about Pendragon, and now that the starter set is out there, he reflects on the creation process and talks a little bit about what people can expect from it. I'll jump across to the interview in just a moment, but first, please remember to subscribe, and thanks for watching.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I mean, it's great. I don't know if you could hear that ominous roll of thunder that just happened, but it was very pretentious. Um, no, it feels really good to finally have it out. I know folks have been waiting a long time for it to come out, and part of that was logistics, getting all our ducks in a row, and part of it was also making sure that we had other things in the pipeline that are going to be able to come out in relatively short order following the starter set. So it's exciting both to have it out, and it's also exciting in terms of like what it represents, which is this new edition really launching and getting like a nice rhythm going in terms of releases.
What's something that you completely didn't envision being in the starter set that has now emerged?
It was interesting when I started on the project because we had a lot of basically we sort of assembled it out of a lot of like Greg's material. I was going through his archives and he was thinking about maybe not a starter set per se, but I think he was maybe envisioning a 32 or 64 page like beginner's Pendragon book or something. So he had written a lot on that. He was working on the sword campaign, which is what you get in the box. So I was like, oh, that's a great introductory campaign right there. So the concept of the starter set sort of emerged from just looking through Greg's archives. But once we decided, oh yeah, we're going to do a starter set, then it was like, well, what else do we need to put in there? And so the thing that like I had the most fun with was writing the solo quest tutorial adventure, partly just because that's kind of how I got into gaming, but like was through these sort of game books, choose your own adventure books. But like I really didn't know if I was up for the task, right? So like I just went for it, and seeing that in the box is really cool. It's really cool to like see that in the box. And I would also just say, having had a chance to look at the physical artifact now, it's just there. You can stare at something on the screen for months and months and months, and there's just no substitute for actually having the thing in your hands. The paper quality is really nice. I mean, there's these things like when you're on the production side, you're like, yes, 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 it's all very well written and very well illustrated, but look at the paper quality, so it's just little things like that.
That's a great thing to point out. Paper quality is good. In terms of celebration for the whole thing, when you work on a Wild West TTRPG, you can be sort of sure that you're going to go and have a bourbon or something afterwards. Do you have a bottle of something Arthurian related stashed away to celebrate the launch?
No, I don't actually. I don't know. I used to know somebody who brewed mead, but no longer. No, but that was another kind of unexpected thing, was when I got my my copy of the box in the mail, because privileges. I got a little bit ahead of everybody else, but when I got my copy, I had already scheduled a game night with my wife and a friend, and we were kind of trying to figure out like, oh, what are we going to do? And I'm just looking at the box. I'm like, you want to play Pendragon? And I mean, it's like I've run these adventures so many times. I've been over them with a fine-tooth comb of editing, proofreading, revising, and yet just looking at it, I was like, I can't think of a better way to celebrate this than to just run it again.
As the releases come forward, I've had to look a bit more into Pendragon and also look a bit more into the way that people are interacting with the story. There's a couple of questions I think have come up, which I think it's a perfect time to answer now. Well, one of them is, do you have a recommended first book for your Arthurian experience? If you're coming in, and whether you already know stuff or whether you want to go in fresh and read something new, is there a, hey, pick up this particular edition, let's use that as a launching point?
Yeah, that's a great question. There's a lot to choose from, and it sort of depends on what you want to get out of it. Some folks would be like, well, I want a good overview of the saga, or I want it to focus in on a particular time period, like when Arthur's a young king, or later, Grail quest, what have you. Pendragon's built around Mallory's Le Morte d'Arthur, so that's certainly a potential place to start. It's a little fraught because there's a lot of different editions. It was written in Middle English, so it effectively has to be translated into modern English, and translators take different approaches to that. Some will just do a straight modern English translation. Others will want to retain some level of a sort of archaic diction, phrasing, words. And then there's a question of like to what degree they retain it. So I always recommend to folks who are looking for like a modern English rendition. Dorsey Armstrong, who's an Arthurian scholar, she did a great rendering of the text in modern English. Greg's recommendation is, if you're looking for like a one volume entry into the lore, T.H. White's Once and Future King, and I would second that. It's fun. It's what the Disney Sword in the Stone movie was based off of, or in part. So there's going to be some plot beats, elements, character bits that are familiar if you've seen that movie. And I mean, he wrote it as a 20th century literary exercise, and so it's got all these sort of issues like psychology and like humanizing these sort of legendary figures. And those would be kind of the classic recommendations, but honestly, like anything out there that appeals to you, like there's a great series of like young adult novels that focus on individual knights of Arthurian lore, like Sir Balin, the Knight of Two Swords. He's got a book. It's one of my favorite knights, so it's like cool. Mary Stewart's trilogy. I recently found out there is an audiobook read by Nicol Williamson, who played Merlin in Excalibur, and it's a very abridged version of that book. I have the full audiobook of The Crystal Cave, which I think is like 12 or 14 hours, and this one's like 2.5 hours. So if you want like a real quick audiobook experience read by one of the great actors of our age who played Merlin, and the book is told from Merlin's point of view, get that.
Little bit of a fun question, a variant on something that we had on the Chaosium YouTube channel. I'm going to give you a couple of Arthurian films, and I would like you to tell me which one you think best captures the atmosphere of Pendragon, with the caveat that I don't think any of these are entirely appropriate, right?
Okay.
So throw at you the Disney Sword in the Stone, Monty Python the Holy Grail, The Green Knight, or King Arthur, as in the modern action movie variant. I believe it is called King Arthur, the most recent remake.
Yeah, I mean, King Arthur on film is such an odd history of cinema. I mean, there's few that really capture it. Of those four, gosh, I mein, I would be inclined, gosh, because I can see merit in all of them. Right. So I rewatched The Sword in the Stone for the first time, probably as an adult, a few years ago. And I was favorably impressed. It's a good latter period classic Disney film. I think at the end of the day, it would be between that and The Green Knight. I love The Green Knight not for its fidelity to the literary canon, but in fact for that very reason, because one of the central tenets of Pendragon is your Pendragon will vary. And to me, The Green Knight really typifies that, because it's like, let's take something that's familiar and let's put our own twist on it, whether you love it or hate it, whatever, right? It's also wonderfully atmospheric. It's wonderfully acted. It's just got a great, and some of the sequences in there, I feel like are the kind of things that would arise out of a Pendragon session.
We've talked a lot about the larger structure of Pendragon as a game, because since you're basically putting together the damn thing, we are approaching you as a GM a lot of the time. But I'd be really interested to talk about your experience as a player in Pendragon as well. I think everybody has some really fond memories of the defining TTRPG characters in their past. Do you have a single knight or a single house maybe that you played that you still remember, or that is very central to sort of your memories of playing, that you can tell us about?
Sure. That would probably go back a long time. I don't get to play that often, sadly. And I certainly don't get to play like campaign style very often. But many years ago, my wife very kindly offered to run Pendragon for me. And she ran me through this scenario sequence, I would call it. It's almost a mini campaign in and of itself. It's called the Heartblade. It's in the old Blood and Lust supplement, still available in PDF. Highly recommended. Basically, anyone who's played the Heartblade will be like, "Oh yes, oh the Heartblade, yes," and that's because it's a great scenario. It's meant to be focused on one player night, and kind of says at the top, like, if you got a player who's kind of a romantic or is interested in doing a romance subplot, approach them, ask them if they're interested. If they are, talk to the rest of the group, ask them if they're okay with one night getting some spotlight time and them helping out. But in this case, it was just a one-on-one game, so it was fine. So I rolled up a night, Sir Athenwy, and we just played through the Heartblade, which is I think 3 or 4 game years, and it was great. Like we had the whole experience of just the romance and like the questing and trying to like get her father's magic sword, and and then once you do, if your true love kind of activates its powers, and it was very like, it was a great game to play with your spouse too, right? But yeah, it was a lot of fun, and it had some very memorable moments, like a time I went off running after some robber knights who had come in during court, and so I wasn't wearing any armor. I just had my sword on me, and these guys came in and started some trouble and rode off in their full armor, and I just took off after them. I think I like critted my reckless roll or something like that, and then caught up to them and started fighting them, and then suddenly realized like they're in armor and I'm not. I like really like in that real time moment had this realization like, oh no, like and sort of had this desperate fight, managed to survive somehow, not get cut down instantly. So yeah, that would be a favorite memory for me.
I know a lot of people are interested in playing some of these epic role-playing games set in, dark and horrible fantasy worlds that aren't really the world of Pendragon. Obviously, you can do anything you want. Your Pendragon will vary. For people who want to play the grittiest, grottiest version of Pendragon, what's your advice for that?
Well, first of all, pick a good time period in the narrative. So the late tournament period to the end of the campaign and the twilight period is a really good one for that. That's very Games of Thrones-ish in a lot of ways, because also by that point the armor looks very Games of Thrones-ish, because it's that kind of 15th century Gothic plate kind of thing going on, and yeah, that's just a meditation on a dream that is dying, and this brief moment of renaissance, of hope, being reborn with the Grail quest, but then sort of realizing that like, well, now that the Grail's been found, that didn't actually solve our problems, and it's kind of up to us to make it through the best we can, and maybe keep that light burning as long as possible. The other classic one would be the Anarchy period, which immediately precedes Arthur drawing the sword from the stone. It's where the starter set kicks off, right? We're coming out of this Anarchy period, but certainly for folks who want to spend a little bit more time in that before they get to that event, the Anarchy lasts for 15 game years, so that's at least 15 sessions, depending on your how quickly you move through the years. And that's one, like, especially if you want to be sort of a petty warlord who's sort of building your own power structure. I mean, there's no king to tell you no. So there's a lot of like warfare between the barons and the lords, and seizing lands and besieging castles and taking things by right of conquest, and that sort of thing. So, and it nicely sets up Arthur coming along and saying, hey, maybe we should not do that, and chivalry and so forth.
Is it possible to play a game of Pendragon where in the first couple of years of gameplay, Arthur kicks it? What happens if you go completely off book?
Yes. Okay. So, the sort of base advice is that nobody has plot immunity except Arthur, Guinevere, and Lancelot. And that's because if you want to do the campaign, you got to have that love triangle. You have to have Arthur creating the vision of this better world for the other knights to aspire to. That being said, and you'll notice I didn't include Mordred in that either. So yes, you could kill Mordred and still more or less follow the same plot. That being said, if Arthur dies in your campaign, then I would just offer the same advice that I would offer for any sort of canon character, which is figure out who's going to take up that mantle. Maybe Gawain becomes king, like in the Green Knight. He has this vision of himself as king. Well, maybe that does come to pass, and then you have the downfall anyway, and it's like, well, yeah, that's because Gawain wasn't up to the task. He wasn't up to the challenge. He failed in his what fate had thrust upon him. I mean, if you really want to go wild, put a player knight in place of Arthur, because normally I would say like, oh, Gawain got killed. Okay, well, give Gawain's quests to the player knights then. Maybe one of the player knights gets challenged by the Green Knight, and how do they handle that? You could do that with Arthur. It would be a challenge. I would not recommend that for novice GMs. I would not recommend it even for myself, but I'm sure somebody out there is up for it. And yeah, I mean, the fundamental thing is that people think, oh, you're dealing with these canonical characters, they can't be touched. And, that's really not the case. It's just a question of how much extra work do you want to make for yourself, honestly.
So we've chatted about a lot of things, probably good to try and wrap some things up. Let me ask you this. It's out now. People can go and get it. In a combination of reflecting on the whole thing and also practical advice that people can use, if you could send out one message to everybody and say, hey, here's what I hope everyone does in terms of getting the book, how they approach it, what they play for it, how long you're hoping kind of they run, sort of an idea. What's your best case scenario for someone getting the best experience of the Pendragon Starter Set?
Okay, so yes, great question, because you got to have that vision when you make something like this, right? So my vision is somebody buys a starter set, they read through the solo quests first and foremost, so they get an idea of the mechanics and the setting. Then circulate that amongst your gaming group. You'll get a PDF if you get the box set from Chaosium or one of our partner stores, right? Or if you whatever, get your hands on a digital copy, or just circulate the actual booklet. It's fine. Let your players read through it. That's what it's there for. It's designed to teach you the rules and the setting, and there's no spoilers, and in fact, there's a little Easter egg in the very first scenario that references the solo quest. So if everybody's read the solo quest, everybody will get the Easter egg. Then let everyone choose their characters. And this has been one of the really gratifying things to me as the starter set's been, kind of moving out more into the world and people have had a chance to look at it, is I love to hear people's favorite picks from among the pre-generated characters, because everybody has at least one, and it's fascinating to see like what appeals to people about each one of these characters. So everyone picks their character, and then yeah, you're gonna dive in and play the sword campaign. And have you read the rule book yet? Yeah, maybe you have, or at least skimmed it. But between the solo quest and the beginning, the initial scenario, which gives you plenty of like page references in book 2, you should be able to jump into it pretty easily, and as you're doing that, the way it's designed, and this is why we excised the first act of the first scenario and put it out as a free quick start, is that first act, which is easily runnable, if that's a word, in one session, is going to culminate with a really epic moment that's literally going to have everybody at the table giving 3 cheers, and by that point, you'll be hooked, and then you just go from there. And as far as like gameplay, value, don't rush it. Normally, we say, oh, try to do like 1 game year per session, maybe 2 sessions at the most. I'd say with the starter set, really take your time. It's okay if it takes 3 or 4 sessions to get through one of the scenarios. Just take your time with it, luxuriate in it, have a lot of fun with it, and then we're designing forthcoming products to dovetail with the starter set, primarily the revised edition of the Grey Knight, which will actually have scenarios that will directly link that to the starter set. So hopefully by the time you wrap up the sword campaign, we'll have the Grey Knight out, and if not, soon enough after that, and you can just keep rolling on into that, or just make your own adventures, go into the archives, all the PDF scenarios that are available from the previous editions, and just make it your own, I guess would be the ultimate vision I had for the starter set, was like, take the sword campaign, use that to get started, and then make it your own.
Super secret last bonus question. If you had to sum up the whole process of getting this out to the point now, releasing today,
Yes.
Give us a final thought on it.
It was my own personal Grail quest.
Right.
No, it was a great experience in terms of just like putting together a product. I've never put together a box set before, and I could not have done it without this amazing team supporting me, both Chaosium folks and my wonderful freelancers. I got to learn how to be an art director, which I found out I really loved, doing art direction and getting awesome illustrations. Sim Cogswell and I worked out the layout template, which was a lot of fun, and just the amount of feedback I had, and the development process in general was just fantastic. And much like how the publication of the starter set is going to kind of unlock new releases, the creation of the starter set really unlocked how I'm sort of guiding the rest of the books in terms of their production, and it's going a lot faster and a lot more smoothly. So it's I got a lot out of it.